Thank you for joining us today. My name is David Goldstone, Executive Vice President and Chief Sales Officer for World Cinema. I would like to welcome you today to the International Luxury Hotel Association's webinar on how COVID has led to changing consumer expectations that now require major technology shifts in our industry. Today's webinar is brought to you by World Cinema. World Cinema is a trusted provider of video, advanced connectivity, and professional services to properties and enterprises across the United States, Canada, Mexico, and the US Virgin Islands. With a dedication to customer service, in addition to our technology, we are the leading provider of technology to the hotel industry today. World Cinema offers solutions that are right for your brand, your property, and ultimately, and most importantly, your guests. You can expect a hands-on project management of technology implementation and centralized point of contact for all your property needs. World Cinema works with you from development stages to ongoing customer support 24/7, 365. We understand your business. If you want more information, please personally reach out to me at dgoldstone@onewci.com or to marketing@wcitv.com. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy your webinar.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tim Kinsella. I'm with Canary Technologies. We bring Silicon Valley speed and smarts in creating contactless solutions, mobile check-in, mobile check-out, upsells, as well as guest staff messaging. We're used by luxury brands, Rosewood, Millennium, and Dream Hotels. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Thanks for your business. Yeah. So I'm excited to be on the panel. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Judy Chen. I'm VP of Development for Dream Hotel Group. We are a lifestyle brand headquartered in New York. For those of you who are local, we have a property in Hollywood. I'm primarily on the deal side, but I do work closely with our ops team, so we are very aware of kind of what we see nowadays in the need for pitching to our developers, what's necessary on the tech side to make deals more safe for everyone. So.
Well, good morning, everyone. As David mentioned, my name is Javier Cano, and I am a hotelier. I am a general manager of the Ritz-Carlton and the JW Marriott in downtown Los Angeles. I have been here in Los Angeles since that hotel opened in 2007. I also oversee Marriott hotels here in LA as well, in addition to running my own hotel. Nice to be here this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm John. I'm with Relay. Hopefully you've had a chance to meet. We have a whole team here. We provide communication solutions for hotels and other industries. We're basically declaring war on the two-way radio, and we've developed a solution that's much smarter, that's really helping teams do more with less, and do a bunch of smart things along the way.
Good morning, Nelson Garrido with Brookfield Property Group. We're an owner. We own hotels domestically and globally, anything from a small limited service hotel to big luxury hotels, and great to be here.
Thank you. I'm actually going to ask the first question and ask Nelson to kick off with the first answer, and then really leave it to the rest of the panel to jump in accordingly. But Nelson, are you using mobile technology to elevate service and bring added conveniences and confidence to guests as they start to travel again?
We really pivoted during COVID, especially on the luxury side and on our independents. Obviously, we leverage all the technology that the brands, and we have all the brands in our portfolio. But on our independent side, we never really had a ton of technology on the mobility side. But we started to introduce QR codes for mobile food ordering. We also piloted some mobile check-in, mobile key in our smaller luxury hotels. That's gotten some traction. We'll see as the folks come back and start using it, along with the mobile app to be able to order your service requests, order towels or what have you from a guest perspective, all to make the guest experience easier. Our kind of philosophy has been, if they want to call, they can still call, but will also, it's a choice for them. If they want to use the mobility functionality, it's there for them.
Thank you. Thank you. Javier, do you want to take
Yeah, I think one of the things that became very apparent as we all went through this COVID time frame was that a lot of behaviors changed, and certainly behaviors that related to technology. And I think that became really evident in a lot of the operations of hotels of all types, where we were all embracing that technology faster possibly than we may have under prior circumstances. But I think what you saw is just a really acceptance more of technology in a lot of different areas. These were tools. They remain tools. And like any tool, you use it for a specific purpose. And if the person who wants to use that tool that they need for that particular job or that particular thing that they want to do, that they're going to get that particular one. And I think that was kind of the thought process behind a lot of the technology. There are some great things that are being done out there that are being put together to help the journey that a customer is on from pre-arrival all the way to departure. And I think that these are not only here to stay, but I think we're going to see continued tools that will be developed that are going to just continue to give people more options, and which I think is a critical thing. As a luxury customer, you want to have the options. You want to have personalized options that are there for what it is you want to accomplish.
Thank you, Javier. John, Judy, Tim, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think.
Well, go ahead.
I'll start, but I think one of the things that we've seen from our customers is along the lines of that personalization that you're talking about is that, one of the challenges obviously that COVID has created is, it's been extremely challenging to get fully staffed. And, in some ways, the customer's expectations are still high post-COVID, right? And the challenge then becomes, how do you keep that level of service and that level of wow for customers with 30% less staff than you had in 2019. And I think that's why we've seen from our customers, we've seen them adopting technology that allows their staff to essentially be two places at once. In some cases, literally, we've got a lot of GMs who are now responsible for multiple properties across a metro area. And I think that's really where the last mile of that customer experience always happens, right? All this technology is fantastic, and there's been a lot of presentations yesterday on all the data that you can bring to bear to make better decisions for customers, and all that is fantastic. But I think everybody who is kind of been part of running a hotel knows that the last mile of delivering that experience is the team that you have on site. And I think that's one of the areas that we've seen most emphasis on is the adoption of technology that allows that last mile of customer experience to be delivered, and it empowers that team who's really needs 100 people, but you have 80 people or 70. So.
If I could, I just wanted to back up Javier's comment regarding choice and options, right? They're tools. Mm-hmm. And what we're finding, a lot of our customers, especially on the luxury side, they're offering the guests the ability to check in ahead of time on their phones, appless, super easy. And if they don't want to, they can come to the desk. But the key is that all the administrative part of checking in, the validation of the ID, the credit card, it's all taken care of before the guest gets to the hotel, so that the staff member can welcome them, just hand the key right over if they don't have the BLE keys, but and then just spend time servicing them. Can we make reservations for you? Is there anything we can have in your room upon your arrival? And again, I think the choice is a great word, and I'd love to hear how Dream their experience has been, but choice.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in the lifestyle space, we're a little bit different, and we, in how we approach our customers. And, at the end of the day, I think everyone's priority is to ensure the safety of our staff and our guests. And at the end of the day, everyone in this room, we're all in the money-making business, right? So how do we use technology to facilitate that so that it streamlines the process, it doesn't take away from the guest experience, but it also becomes something that is unique and memorable. So one example that I've been always really harping about is we have a robot. His name is Alfred, and he has a British accent, and he is at Dream Hollywood. He has a little bow tie, and he delivers items to the guest rooms. I think he kind of roams around the lobby, but he also tells jokes. I haven't heard his jokes. I don't know if they're good, but a lot of people Instagram that, and that's cute. That's one less touch point that you have to interact with someone. I don't think it takes away from the guest experience, and people are telling oh, did you see? I got a drink from Alfred delivered to my room. And I think those are the things that, as a lifestyle brand, you're still creating those experiences and events that people like to share with their friends, but not necessarily take away from the guest experience.
I would like to just say something that Tim said I thought was really important is that if you take a look at how people are utilizing the arrival process, for example, there's a lot of administrative part of that. And I know there's a lot of discussion around whether we could lose the guest contact, the value of human interaction. I think that's absolutely spot on. But I think the importance of that is the human interaction that the guest wants. It's not necessarily us saying, here's what we want you to have as a human interaction, meaning we need the check-in. Well, do we really need the check-in? Right? We need the experience of connecting with the guest. So the idea of having tools in place that allow you to do some of that administrative part gets you back to the core of let us create an experience for you. Let us assist you with creating an experience for you during your stay with us, which is much more the heart of what you want for an experiential visit, as opposed to, and anything we can do to assist with moving that administrative side off to one side, I think is well received by our customer. Let them make the choice of where they want the interaction to take place, as opposed to saying you have to do this, or you have to do this, or you have to do something else.
Well, in the last 18, 24 months, the guest has been doing that, right? Outside of our business, they've been ordering stuff through their phone. They've been, picking up stuff without any interaction. So, it's giving that choice to the customer. I know it's a little more sensitive on the luxury side because it's the experience, right? But the choice and having the tools that work correctly, because the worst thing you can have is, hey, we have this mobile app, we have this mobile check-in or mobile key or what have you, and then it fails. And especially when you're charging the rates you charge on the luxury side, it needs to be spot on, just like service.
I think that's really important. The expectation of that first experience is very similar to just consumer technology broadly, right? You buy, I think it was Chris yesterday talking about the experience of getting the iPhone and taking it out of the box, and they've spent a ton of time and money making sure that first experience you have with that iPhone is fantastic. And I think that's really where the expectations are, is that things are going to work, and it's not going to create more work. When you introduce tools and technology, I think one of the biggest kind of reasons they backfire, both for guests and for technology that's adopted by hotel staff, is that it actually, it solves 5 problems and creates 10 problems. And I think that's not a new thing. Like that's actually not a COVID thing. But I think as we look at these different areas of bringing technology into the guest experience and the hotel operations, like that is the biggest thing. It actually, it needs to simplify the experience.
And we need to simplify our processes, because we're still sometimes trying to take that new technology and still do it the old way, which creates the 15 to 20 more problems.
Yeah. and what's interesting also is from a technology company, manufacturing what's required is keeping it simple, because you've got travelers from their teens into their 80s who, if they are going to use this technology, have to be able to use it without having to call the front desk, without needing help. One of the things when we developed our mobile app through COVID, which was really pushed by Marriott, was A, keeping it simple, and then B, do you do it via an app or do you do it via a QR code? And the feeling was, and correctly so, a QR code is going to be a lot easier. Guests don't want to have to download yet another app onto their mobile devices. Whereas with a QR code, people are so used to ordering in restaurants with a QR code. We developed it with a QR code, and it's been seamless. Very fast, very highly adopted, and the most important thing is that the hotel front desk is not getting inundated with questions as to how to use it, how to change channels, how to turn up the volume, et cetera, et cetera. So with that said, obviously, do you believe, and we've touched on this somewhat, but do you believe that A, this technology is now here to stay, it's going to be expanded on, and it's going to cease, it's going to stop guest anxiety about being in the room and traveling? Will it help get guests back?
I can just jump in as far as the, is it here to stay? We've all experienced the QR code at restaurants for menus. I love that. I actually do. And especially in these COVID times, you don't have to worry whether it was wiped down. I don't happen to be all that worried about it, but I know there are a lot of people that are. Additionally, with the mobile check-in opportunities, no more passing the credit cards back and forth. You don't have to have your ID passed back and forth, so just building on the contactless. But as far as is it here to stay, I think some will be, for sure. The convenience and the reduced staff requirements that are wins for everybody, I think those will be here to stay. And going again back to Javier's point, just that people will, I think they will continue to demand the choice of service and how they decide they want to be serviced.
Right, and I think as an industry and as a consumer, we both pivot and adapt. So remember the time when we didn't have to take off our shoes for TSA. So, we forget very quickly, and once things become the norm, it's like, oh, well, this is what I'm used to doing. And as much as people say, not having like that check-in experience takes away from the interhuman interaction, I will say this, I haven't met a line that I liked, and to have the added convenience of not doing that does not take away from my experience at the hotel. If anything, it adds to the convenience. So I do think there are certain things that make life easier. There are certain things that we will adapt to and become accustomed to. And then there are things that, on the cost and on the ownership side or the development side, that it does make more sense to keep. Again, we are in the money-making business, so.
I think what you see now is that as people are traveling, leisure travelers are booking much more short-term, and what it's causing is some unexpected and unplanned for spikes in our business. It used to be much, much better at being able to determine how business was going to flow. Well, that really puts a strain on operations. It puts a strain on everybody's ability to be able to create that experience that they want to for the customers that are coming in. So when I look at technology, I look at this as a internal tool to help us to be able to bridge some of these ups and downs. If we can help in any way, that it is going to smooth that out somewhat. So I absolutely think that this is here to stay. As a matter of fact, I think that it's going to grow significantly as it becomes more something that becomes more easily usable for everybody that's coming in. The opportunities for people to arrive, 60% of the people that was surveyed recently in some data that was put together said they were interested in a contactless or a no front desk arrival process. So that's a huge number. So I think that if done well, nobody goes to an airline counter. We all check in on our phone. We have our seat. We know where we're going. We can go to the key points of a stay. We want a warm welcome. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a line in a check-in. So I do think that technology is with us. I think technology is going to continue to be part of a pillar to enhance our experience and making sure that we get these great tools that are being developed. We'll continue to do that and continue to grow.
I'm going to just let Judy and Javier do all my answers from this point forward. So
You're done.
Yeah, I'm
You're
going to sit here.
Well, I do want to add about the technology side. I currently live in Vegas. I split my time between LA and Vegas. And the gaming industry is very new to me. And what I've learned with speaking with ops people in that side of the world is the amount of data that they track for every whale or even non-whale to see how much you spend, what you like, how much they comp you. And I think what's valuable now with the technology that we can now utilize, especially on the luxury and lifestyle space is how do we take that technology and better understand our guests? It's one thing to be personalized, it's another thing to be customized, right? So you can put my name on the screen when you welcome me into my room. Okay, big whoop, great, thank you. But what else can you do? Do you know, like, this is the drink that I like, this is the meal that I like, I want to be able to push things to you to remind you what you like, or to maybe give you something that you didn't think you did, so that I push you to continue spending at my property. So I do think there is a lot of upside to utilizing tech in different ways that will allow you to really know your consumer that we really haven't touched upon before, that will generate, more of a return. And especially coming from the lifestyle space, if you have been a Dream, we are a 24/7 property from breakfast to nightlife. So how do we keep the guests in there spending? How do we keep the locals coming back? And I think tech can add a valuable layer to that will allow us to better cater to our guests.
And this is great to hear, and Javier, thank you, and team. I agree. I think it is here to stay. And another classic example of that is, if you recall, maybe 3-4 years ago, the compendium in the room was still a sought after thing, and there were huge debates at the brands. Do we take the compendium out? Do we not take it out? The feeling was the compendium was outdated before it even got onto the desk. Pages were being torn out, and we, along with many other companies in the industry, worked with the brands to have the compendium brought onto the TV screen. And I don't think anybody today misses the compendium. You don't get a complaint that there's no compendium in the room. It's so easy to navigate what's going on in the hotel, what the restaurant hours are, and it's easy to also for the hotel to be able to change the messaging to the guests and to send messages to the guests. So if you have a UPS package that has arrived, you can send the message to the TV and to the guest's mobile device that their package has arrived. So it definitely is making things easier, seamless, and here to stay. I definitely believe that.
Customers like to click buttons, and a one-button push is a great thing. All of us who are on Amazon buy it. That's a really easy thing to do. So I do think that the evolution of this, the continued evolution, I mean, it's evident in platforms such as those that are involved with mobile dining, that we have all learned through the use of the pandemic to order our meals when we want them, how we want them, and boom, they show up through any type of services. And so I think carrying that through into a luxury space is something that is very, it's supported very much by the idea and the whole concept of personalizing to get you what you want when you want it. And so this idea of having personalization through a device that allows you to order what you want when you want it, and the idea, frankly, that we've looked at this from a financial side, we get 40% greater spend when people go through and take a look and say, ooh, that looks good, let me add that on. And so you are actually enhancing the experience. It might not be the same as going through and waiting for a phone to ring, and are you sure that's the order as it went through? So these things are great pieces to help enhance that experience.
We're finding that our customers that are using the contactless check-in, in addition with our upsell engine, and if you think about it, when somebody's checking in, that's when they're sort of trying the jacket on, right? They're thinking about their experience. They're thinking about the arrival and going up to the room. I do want a bottle of wine. I would like to upgrade $50 for a balcony. It's the perfect time to do it. It's like the checkout line at the grocery store, right? The People magazine and the Snickers bar. So it helps the guest, and guess what? You get a boost in revenue.
And it's interesting. Some of us were recently at Marriott's Minor conference in Orlando. Mine is the Marriott International North America Owners Meeting. And Marriott tied in with Clear at this event, whereby you had to download your vaccination proof. It was all handled seamlessly through Clear, and when you arrived at the check-in, it was all downloaded. All they had to do was take your temperature, and similar to what ILHA did here with the purple wristband that you were vaccinated, it was all downloaded with Clear. And I think that, again, is something that we're going to see more of. And I'd like to ask the panelists from an actual hotel point of view, do you think we're going to get to a point where where hotels are going to need to check vaccination status or COVID negativity status, and in doing so, is that going to be seen as intrusive, or is it going to be seen as being helpful? From a personal point of view, I have no issue whatsoever being asked to give proof of vaccination at all. It gives me a sense of comfort, and I think it should give a sense of comfort to others. And I know this is a little bit of a hot topic, but I wanted to throw it out there.
I think it depends on the state you're going to be operating. You know, in some states it's fine, in others it's not. And you know, New York, you can't enter a restaurant without your vaccination card. At the beginning, it was a bit of a mess for visitors that didn't understand that. So I think it's, you know, I don't think we should be the police of that, because that puts our frontline employees kind of in a pretty tough situation. But, you know.
Yeah, it certainly varies, right? One of the things that anybody who's a hotelier in the room knows that your local public health department, who you probably knew absolutely nothing about before COVID, were the people that were running your life. So your life really depended on what this group of people said you could and could not do, right? And so we continue to live under that. Right? So as we talked about, in New York and in the city of LA, which my hotel is in, we have to check for vaccination. And we have to check for vaccination if you go to the bar, if you go to the restaurant, if you go to the spa, if you go to the fitness center. That's a lot of checking. Oh, and a meeting too, right? So if you're in there, he could check you 5 times. So clearly, we are not going around checking people 5 times. So we have to figure out something to do, and which we've done. And a lot of people, depending on what their local health department will let you do, because one size certainly is not going to fit all, we've gone to the wristband piece. So you come in, we check you once. As long as you wear the wristband, you can move around anywhere in the hotel that requires vaccination being checked. But this is a landscape that is likely going to continue to be incredibly varied depending on what your public health officer, which again I never knew those existed, are the ones that are going to tell us what we are going to do for a while yet. So I think that this whole idea, there's some great technology out there. Some is less good than others, frankly. My favorite app is the New York City app. I don't know if everybody's here from New York City, but I love that one because it's got a picture of your ID and a picture of your Vax card as opposed to a QR code and you're fumbling. I think to one of the comments that was made earlier, the simpler you can keep technology, the better. It's an easier tool. And I think that's what sets us up. But I think that it's going to be driven by local jurisdictions. And I think that, you know, as hoteliers, our job is to go through and try to make that experience the best we can for the customer, educate up front and understand what they come through. And frankly, we've had very, very little pushback on this. The only time it happens is about 1 a.m. in the bar, but that kind of happens on no matter what you're telling people at that point.
Thank you. Judy, anything you want to add?
Well, I mean, let's be honest, no one knows anything, right? So it's all the blind leading the blind, and we don't know what's going to happen next. And I think maybe even a couple months ago, we all anticipated kind of like a shift back to 2019, which we know is not going to happen. And so to the extent that, you know, we continue to check, I think, you know, I hate to be pessimistic or be the cynic in here, but you know, there's going to be people trying to get around it, and there are going to be the fake vaccination cards. I mean, how do you prevent all of it? We cannot. We do the best to ensure that our guests and staff are safe, but to what extent is that really? We can only do as much as, and you know, again, back to being in Vegas. Vegas is the wild, wild west. So when I go to New York and LA, you know, I have to like always take out my vaccination card. When I was in Miami and Vegas, it's like anything goes. And I grew up in the South. I was back in Nashville, and it was just like the honky tonks. They were packed. No one was wearing masks. So I think part of the problem is also the lack of uniformity in requirements. So for me to be in all these different places and have all these different regulations makes it a little bit more difficult to enforce. So yes, I'm vaccinated and I can show my card, but every city, let alone every state, has its own restrictions and requirements, and it does make for a lack of uniformity that, we can only enforce what we can. And, we definitely want the best for our guests, but it is challenging. And I'm not gonna lie and say like, oh yeah, checking the vaccination card and everything is great. It's tough.
So technology shifts are obviously affecting the hotel business. Judy, I'm going to ask you a question with regard to Alfred. First of all, I think the name should have been Vaughn. You would have got a lot more business had you named Alfred Vaughn instead of Alfred, okay? But
Vaughn, our general manager, will be speaking next. So it's his idea, so you can...
I had to get that in for him. But my question is, was that as a result of COVID, or would that have happened anyway?
Well, I will say this, and I'll let Vaughn speak on his panel about kind of the ops side that that's his focus on. But I will say this, obviously it's been very popular, and that I believe during lunch he had told me that the robotics company was able to raise another round of funding because of us as a case study recently. So whether or not it was due to COVID or not, I'm assuming that it was. I could be wrong, but I do think, especially with anything that is unique and memorable, it was a matter of time, whether you're short-staffed or even if you do have the staff, there's something really lovely about a little robot bringing me something that is different from, it doesn't mean it takes away from my experience, right. And that shareability, that that experience, of like, oh, did you see this at Dream? And, and I think that's very valuable too, regardless of COVID.
Absolutely. So it would have probably happened anyway, but it's something.
I think so.
COVID accelerated all of this. I mean, you look at what you do from a personal side, and now how do we adapt all that in the hotel space? Because we have to change and be faster, because the customer is going to pass us if we don't.
And we can't assume that how we travel is the right way to travel, right?
Yep.
There's all types of consumers out there. Mm-hmm. The next generation is much more tech savvy than we are, so their expectation levels are also very different, whereas maybe like our parents would want X, Y, and Z, the next generation does not. And so when we're like, oh, well, we're not sure if this is gonna work, it may be very well received with the younger traveler. And so, it's hard to have the mindset of how I think is the way to travel. It's exactly what Javier said. It's what does the traveler want versus what do we think they want. And sometimes we're pleasantly surprised that a lot of things that make life easier for the hotel and the guests is very, very well received. And that is a win-win for everyone.
And I think that's actually where the biggest gap is today on the technology landscape, which is, how do we lower the barriers enough? Javier spoke to this a little bit, kind of how do we lower the barriers enough so that guests are going to make use of these technologies or these different pathways to access different services and increase revenues and things like that. I think, if you think back to the beginning of like Uber, for example, when Uber was trying to raise money early on, they had trouble. They actually had trouble convincing people that the taxi market was a big enough market. And what the investors at the time didn't kind of think about is Uber allowed them to lower the barrier so far to call a car that more people are going to do it. The pie was going to grow, and it grew, 100x relative. So the ridership on taxis, Uber's technology drove the barrier down so far that more and more people took more and more taxis essentially than ever did before. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really where the big gap is today, is because I think the opportunity is big, where you talk about the data and the personalization and accessing these unique experiences, but I think you have to really bring the barrier so far down so that people will start to make use of it. Because if they hit a barrier, they try to interact with something in their room and it kind of doesn't work on the first try. You're not gonna see the behavior.
Very valid.
Totally agree. It's got to be dead simple and dead effective.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, people don't generally like to share great experiences, but they love to share bad experiences.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the first thing, everyone, the worst coffee fee ever at this cafe.
But I think new technology has this problem, in really any space, not just the hotel space, right? Like, I bought an Amazon Alexa like the first month it came out, and I remember kind of talking to it and feeling really dumb, right? Like, I'm trying to get this thing to do something, and it's not doing what I expected. And I really didn't have an idea of kind of how I should utilize it in my home, right? And I think Amazon probably didn't really know how we were going to interact with it. But that's changed over time, right? I kind of like, okay, now I have one in my kitchen, and I can play music with it, and I can set timers, and I can do all those things. And the technology has gotten better through those iterations. And there are fewer scenarios where, hey, like, I feel really dumb now for having interacted with this new technology in this way. So I think, like, for the hotel business, it is very analogous to like really any other technology adoption scenario, which is you really early on you're going to have some bumps in the road, but I think having that experience so that the customer is interacting and wants to have this experience and it can deliver on it, and that's when you'll start to see much faster adoption across the board.
Yeah, technology has to work for you. It can't be something that's out there that makes it difficult. I think to what John is saying, I mean, I worked at a hotel where we had these very elaborate alarm clocks. Well, you couldn't really program them. You couldn't really set the time for them. And frankly, you've messed up into things going off all the time. So I took them all out, and I went back to the little alarm clock that was manual, and people were ecstatic about this because it was simple, it was easy, it did what it was supposed to do, and didn't complicate people's lives. So I think if you kind of think of that as what the use that technology can do for you, the idea is you don't want it to complicate your life, you want it to make it easy, and you want to be something that you are willing to use. Otherwise, it's going to sit there and go, I don't want anything to do with that, and I think I'd rather just unplug it and have the thing go off at some random time.
And that's the thing with technology, as it makes your life easier once you learn and adapt how to use it, then you get to a point where you're like, how did I ever live without it, right? So, we are very savvy and we learn and we adapt, and, I do agree though, I mean, you want to keep things simple and you want to make your life more efficient and whatever it may be, and all these tools can streamline it. Streamline it is how do you use it, how does the hotel implement it, but, we complain about any changes that we have to make in our lives, but then once we get used to it, we're like, this is amazing. I wish I had this all along. So it's kind of like thinking about a time before Uber, when I lived in New York, and you can't get a cab on New Year's Eve, and it was just like, now we're thinking like, how did we survive without that?
Right.
Along those lines, I think, I don't think anyone would argue that airlines battle on service, but the airport experience undeniably has become better because of the ability to check in, skip the desk, and just use the QR code to. Now, we all do remember, though, that those QR codes didn't work all the time, right, when they first came out, right? So what did people do? They printed it out, and they tried the QR code. But now it just works, and I can't even imagine going back to the way it was before. It really has helped the airport experience, to your point.
And I think that's, we think about, kind of the topic of this panel being about technology shifts and how COVID has driven them. I think like one of the big winners is the QR code. Like there's so many more people understand how to interact with the QR code now than they did 18 months ago, right? I was at a restaurant 2 weeks ago with my dad, 78 years old. He's scanning the QR code at the menu, no problem, right? He's dialed in. So I think that's one of the things when we think about how to lower the barrier and how to get people to adopt and engage. I think 2 years ago, I would have said, no way, don't put QR codes on everything, right? But I think now, COVID, very distinctly has driven that shift where people know how to interact with that thing. And I think you're right to point out that the flying experience has reinforced it specifically.
Well, obviously, this topic, we could just keep going all morning. It's so interesting, and there's really so much to discuss, but we have about 7.5 minutes left. Are there any questions in the audience? And if there are, please, do you mind going up to the mic, because it is being recorded? Do you mind? Thank you, and thank you for asking. Sorry, thank you. And we would have liked to have allowed a little bit more time for questions, but it's been a very interesting and fluid discussion.
Sorry, I'm fun-sized, so I have to lower. Thank you very much for your insight. My one question, a lot of the luxury hospitality experience includes charging incidentals like internet. With a lot more technology shifts going to web-based or app-based functionality like QR codes to order food and everything, are you going to start to see a shift to include internet accessibility to be able to facilitate technology-based services to your guests without then seeing a $24 or $14 daily charge to use wireless or Wi-Fi or internet in your properties?
It's the ongoing debate.
Let me take a shot at that one. That's an easy one. Nobody wants to pay. Who here wants to pay for internet? Anybody raise their hand? Nobody wants to pay for internet. How many people here pay for internet at home? Everybody pays for internet at home, right? So I think one of the things that we have to think about is this. You walk into a building and you fully expect that your device is going to work. You expect this device is going to work. You expect your iPad's going to work. Your laptop's going to work. Oh, by the way, I want to stream and watch that game. You know, all that requires an infrastructure. And I'm speaking on behalf of my colleague, the owner over here, that somebody has to pay for that. And I know that it is not something that people like, but the reality is that with the technology world that changes and how much bandwidth is required, you have a meeting. You want to be able to stream all kinds of things. Everybody's out there checking their email. A few years ago, that would have crashed everything. Now you just expect it to happen. So for us to create something for you to have that expect to happen, there's a price in there somewhere, right? How that gets translated is that everybody would love it to be in the room rate. There's no doubt about that. But nobody wants to pay more for the room rate. So we live with that balance. And so is the system perfect? No, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But we've got to figure something out in order to be able to have both. We want to be able to provide the guests with everything they need to be able to use their devices. At the same time, we have to be able to afford to continuously upgrade the backbone to be able to make that happen.
And you're absolutely right in terms of the investment. I mean, every single hotel we buy, we normally are doing a major renovation, and it's in the upper upscale luxury side, and the amount of money that gets spent in the infrastructure side has just grown tenfold and tenfold and tenfold. So philosophy, you know, if you're going to charge for internet, it needs to work.
Yeah.
It needs to work flawlessly. You know, and to do that, you do have to spend a lot more money than just putting up access points. It's got to be a really well-designed network, because people are walking in with 3, 4, 5 devices. They get a family, and they've got 20 devices that they're bringing in with them. And you got kids gaming, you got email, all of that stuff is a huge strain on the infrastructure. And to do it right, you've got to spend a lot of money on these networks to do it. It's a touchy situation, you know. If you're paying $800 a night, do you want to really charge $24 for the internet? No, but you know, we've got to find a balance of how do we provide the service and provide the expectation that it's all going to work. I don't think you get much resistance of people paying for something that works and works well for them.
And what's the alternative? Not having it?
Right.
I don't think I could be able to survive if I didn't have internet access. So it is something that I think if we want it, it's, you know, understandable. It's obviously not ideal to be paying for it, but there is the infrastructure to pay for and what we're accustomed to. So I won't skimp on the fee just so I'm like, you know, I'm going to stick it to the man and not pay for it and then not have internet. You know, it's just not going to work for me personally. I can't speak for you guys. So, you know, I mean, there is a, you know, we pay for what we need and want. And I think that's a fair trade for what we have to do as an operating business.
Yeah, it's not always the way the guest looks at it, though.
Right,
Nope.
I agree.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. It's a great conundrum that we have.
Right.
And there is no easy answer.
I agree.
No one has one. And so you touch upon one of the big challenges that we face. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
Right.
We have time for one more question. Anybody? Do you mind going to the mic? And thank you.
Run. No, I'm just kidding.
Sharon will let us go longer, don't worry.
Hi. So I have a question about the data that we collect on. I mean, we have a massive amount of data on consumers and guests in general. And I know that some of you have probably experienced this as well. You're talking about a product or about a hotel, and then all of a sudden you see an ad for it on your phone, and you never searched for it on your phone, but it appears. And in my opinion, it's a little disturbing sometimes. Like maybe I've watched too many movies about AI taking over the world and stuff, but where do you draw the line in terms of privacy concerns, and how do you navigate that data and making sure that you're not crossing any boundaries? Thank you.
I'll take that. So as a technology company, we've kind of faced that exact question because we rely on targeted advertising to reach our customers, and the better the data is, the better the targeting is, right? And then the more efficient like our business can be, right? So I think it's a real challenge. I think the heart of your question, I think, has to come back to the transparency in the collection process, right? And you've seen a lot of changes over the last 12 months even on that with Apple. Now, if you install an app, you're getting that question of, should I ask this app not to track me and things like that. I actually think, despite those choices creating environments where there are less data, I think it's the step in the right direction of saying, we're going to collect this data on you, and this is why we're doing it, and this is what we're doing with it. I think there are real kind of good and honest reasons to do that, but I think the problem has been in the past 5-10 years is that it's been opaque and it's been kind of done in a way that has been a little bit shifty, and that's violated some of the expectations that our customers have had.
I think it's a great question. And I think the reality is that there are many companies that are out there that are in the search business that do exactly that. And that is what they do for a living. I think if you were to talk to companies on our side, you find that we are very, very careful in the way we send information out, wanting to make sure that you give approval. We go through a huge process internally in terms of what gets sent out. More people on our side want to send things to you than are allowed to, by far. And so I think that there's a difference there, I think, between the CRM and the information that we get and collect as operators and our communication to you versus what I think some of the general platforms that are out there that are search engines and such, and how they manipulate and do some of the algorithms that are out there. So I do think there's a little bit of difference in there, but I think that nonetheless, I think to what John's saying, this whole idea of you controlling your data, which is now becoming more and more popular, which I think is going to be really over the something that we do just as a course of business, is going to be very critical in terms of what you want to see you controlling it versus what is being thrown at you.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry that Sharon gave us such a short time for this panel, but for next year we'll make amends, I can promise you. But to the panel, thank you so much. It was great having you and very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.